Okay, today we're going to be talking about factoring. We've been doing a lot of work on distributing, and the, there's a lot of different factoring. You guys have already done things like find the greatest common factor or do prime factorization, where you take something like 12 and you break it down into what can multiply to give me 12, and I keep going until I only have prime numbers. That's factoring, prime factorization. But the factoring we're going to be focusing on is basically the opposite of distributing. Okay, so in other words, we're going to be taking things like 4x plus 12 and figuring out what did it look like when there was a number out here and then stuff in the parentheses. Okay, so this should actually be pretty easy, okay, for our purposes. Because if I have something like 4x plus 12, I know that in these parentheses I'm going to have the x. And so obviously the number I would need out here then would have to be 4, right? Because 4 times x will be 4x. So that makes sense. So then all I have to figure out is what number goes here so that when I multiply it by 4, I get 12. Well, that's easy. That's 3. 4 times 3 is 12. And so it's taking this and trying to go back to what it looked like before you would have distributed. Okay. And so if we look at some examples, again, what you're going to have to be careful of is signs. All right. So this first one, obviously, when I look at this, my first guess to what goes out front would be a 7. I'm going to pull a 7 out there. That's going to leave me an x right there. Obviously, 7 times x would give me 7x. And then what do I multiply 7 by to get 42? Well, any dolt on the street should be able to tell you that that would be 6. So 7 times quantity x plus 6 would give me 7x plus 42. So let's go down to this one. Again, obviously I see the 9y there. I know I'm going to have a y inside, so it should probably be a 9 out front. Now I do have to pay attention to signs. This is a minus here, so that means I'm going to need a minus inside. And 9 times what gives me 63? 9 times 7 is 63. So 9y minus 63 is the same as 9 times the quantity, y minus 7. Okay? Down here, now I have noticed that I've got a negative 4 in front of the b. So that's going to be really important. So instead of just bringing a 4 out, I'm going to have a negative 4 out front here. I still need the b. Now, I've got to think. This is a minus 16, a negative. I pulled a negative 4 out. So negative 4 times what will give me a negative 16? If I remember my multiplication and division rules, a negative times a positive will give me a negative. So this will have to be a plus 4 in here, so that this would wind up being a minus 16. Okay, so you have to be really careful with those signs. Same idea down here. You see right away I want a negative 3 out here. And that's going to leave me a D. But then what do I multiply times negative 3 to get positive 15? Well, if I want to end up with a positive, I have to do a negative times a negative. So I'm going to have a minus in here, and obviously 3 goes into 15 5 times. And so what I'm trying to make sure is really clear here is if you have a negative out front, and I have to pull that outside the parentheses, then I have to be really careful about what sign is going to be in here. If it's going to be plus or minus. So I always have to be thinking, all right, negative times what will give me negative? Well, negative times positive. Negative times what will give me a positive? It's a negative times a negative that gives me a positive. So I'm going to do minus 5. That's what you're going to have to be really careful of when I'm pulling out negatives. Okay? So again, try these 4. You're factoring them out. Pull what they have in common out front, and then put what would be left in parentheses. Okay? Should look like it does before you do the distributive property. So do these 4 and bring them to class tomorrow, and we'll check them.